we actually have two clocks within this device that we should be aware of. Now, clearly we have our timecode counter that we can see on the front page here, and this is showing us hours, minutes, seconds, frames. This counter is referring to the internal circuitry specialized for high accuracy timecode. So if you want to get technical, there's a special chip with a crystal oscillator, and it's, like I said, very highly specialized for accuracy. So this is our accurate clock. This is what we want to be looking at when we're jamming an external device like a Slate or a camera or anything that takes timecode. So when we do our snap tests and when we visually do a check with another camera crew member or whatnot, we are looking at this number for accuracy. So this is our timecode clock. Like I said, there are two clocks that we have to be aware of in this device. We talked about our main timecode clock that's based on our hardware and built for accuracy. But before we go ahead and start jamming things, we need to be aware of the real-time clock, or sometimes referred to as RTC. The real-time clock has a very important purpose, and that is if I power down this device for a day, a few days, a few weeks, a month, maybe even a year, and I power it back up, I want this device to have a vague idea of what time and date it is. Now, the real-time clock is not as accurate as our timecode clock. It's meant just to kind of keep a reference, to keep a vague memory of roughly where we are. Now, it's prone to drift over time, and it's going to kind of fall out of accuracy after a few days of being powered down. What we're going to do before we actually have any confidence about timecode, we need to set up our real-time clock and make sure that it's somewhat accurate. Now, it doesn't have to be accurate to Greenwich Mean Time and, synced with a satellite to the very second. It is just a guide. So we're going to look for time and date, set time date. And let's just say, to keep things simple, it's 10 a.m. because we're on a 24-hour mode right now. So I'm going to just look at my watch or my phone, see that it's about to turn 10 a.m. Let's also just verify that that date looks good. Looks good to me. And I'm going to hit done. Now this should effectively jam our timecode clock to the correct time of day, or at least to a corrected time of day. Just a few more settings in the systems menu before we're good to go. Make sure that you are using 24-hour clock, not a 12-hour clock. So that just saves any confusion in post, whether a take was recorded at 9 a.m. versus 9 p.m. Just way easier numbering system for us to keep track. Also, the date format should be set to the European date standard. So that is day, month, year. I personally always found that more intuitive to have the smallest increment first. But more importantly, at Humber, we're going to be using this across departments as a standard. So remember, European date standard is what we are using. The next one, time zone, you're not going to be using this for your projects, but just to show you, you could easily increment your time zone. Let's say you're jumping a time zone every day and you're traveling a lot with your gear. You could easily just shift. And then daylight savings time. This just saves you setting your clock so that you don't forget and end up with a 1-hour offset. Timecode menu. First, timecode mode. I only want to see you guys using 24-hour run in this class. There are many other timecode modes. They all have a very specific purpose. Just to give you an example, let's say I had a hard timecode cable hardwired to another device, like a camera or a different recorder. I could set this up in such a way that when I hit record on this device, it record triggers whatever it's connected to. So when I hit record on the audio, the video starts recording simultaneously. We're not doing anything like that. You guys are only using 24-hour run. Frame rate. Make sure you know your frame rate. I believe we're only using 2398. So be very aware if you're ever working in a different frame rate, this needs to match. You can also manually set your time code. So if you want to deviate from the real-time clock, this is where you can go in and just manually set a custom value. You can also manually set your user bits. So if you've never heard this term before, user bits, this is the date information that is embedded in the metadata. So make sure that this is following each day for the correct date. Otherwise, you're gonna have a problem. You're gonna end up with footage and you won't know which time code is from what day. That could cause a lot of problems down the pipeline. So be very aware of your user bits if you're the sound mixer. So we have day, month, year, and UU. We know what day, month, year means, but UU, this refers to the actual shooting day. So it's all well and good knowing what, the actual date was, but just for another level of control and organization, it's good for us to know the shooting day. Jam menu. Up top, we have receive time code, and nothing's coming in, which is absolutely normal for this setup. We're not accepting external sources of time code. We are, in fact, the timecode generator, or more specifically, the 664 is the timecode generator. Now, let's say we were using a different device to jam the 664. So let's say the camera was the generator and the 664 was the receiver. We would see numbers moving here for receive timecode if there was an external source. And if we wanted to jam our 664 to that external source, we could simply hit the jam TC. But since nothing is coming in, we're not having any external source, we default to our original. Our slate is out of sync. Let's fix it. First, let's just quickly take a look at this. On-off switch for the slate. Backlight setting here on this side, all the way over here, which refers to this, high, medium, and low for the backlight. But most importantly, the timecode rate. So there's a switch, there's like a little switch that you need a small screwdriver to switch, and you need to make sure that you are using the appropriate timecode rate. So since we're using 2398, we're gonna switch this or make sure it's already set to 4 because that's the diagonal position referring to 23. So you shouldn't really have to mess with these settings. They should be set as they are. But we can see this is switched to the number 4 setting. We're just gonna leave it as is. All right, so let's jam the slate. As you can see, it's out of sync. We're gonna need a cable like this. On this end, we have a 5-pin LEMO connector. And on this end, we have what looks like a guitar cable. So fun fact, you can actually record timecode as an audio track. So let's say you're working with a camera that doesn't actually have timecode capabilities or doesn't even have a timecode input. You could get the right cable to record your timecode as an audio track, and then in post, you can use it to sync. So a really nice workaround for cameras that don't actually deal with timecode at all. All right, so let's actually start to jam this slate. And we're gonna be very careful to make sure that that little red dot lines up with the little notch at the top of the connector on the 664. So you shouldn't have to force this. Should be relatively easy to connect. And then before I jam the Slate, I'm going to power it off. I'm going to connect my cable. And turn it on. So there we go. Now we're going to do the snap test. And this is just to make sure that the recorder is in sync with the Slate. The sound mixer will read these numbers out loud and snap their fingers on the second as it ticks by. And the boom operator will do the same, reading these numbers on the Slate. So let's just do it right now. 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50. So that just shows that there's nothing noticeably out of sync, nothing offset. Before we jam camera, we have to verify that we're working in the same frame rate that we've chosen in our audio device. So you guys should be using 2398 unless otherwise authorized. And one thing I like about this camera, they have a big timecode menu button. So there's a sub menu here and it's the run mode. You guys should only be using free run. What that means is this allows our camera's clock to rotate on a 24-hour clock basis, as opposed to this option here, record run. If we were to choose this, then our time code would only roll when we're actually rolling camera. And when we're stopped, we wouldn't be sticking to a 24-hour time of day. It would not match our actual time of day. We don't want that. We want free run. So we are on a 24-hour cycle. On the timecode in-out setting, you want to make sure this is set to in, because we are receiving timecode. The camera in this case is the timecode receiver. So we are taking timecode into the camera. We're setting it to in. Okay, let's jam the camera. This time we're using a different cable specifically for the camera. On this end, it's the same. It's the 5-pin LEMO. And this cable actually splits into two. So I'm going to find that little red dot. Just do a zoom in. There we go. Line it up with the notch. Time code out. Into the camera. Okay, use the BNC cable here. Connect it, rotate till you feel it click. Now that we've jammed the camera, we have one thing left to do, and it's extremely important. Do not skip this step. Even though our timecode matches, we still need to set our date information, otherwise known as our user bits. Now, this camera is defaulted to use user bits that are based on the internal real-time clock of the camera. So this is set to internal recording mode. So if we go back, let's compare our user bits from our 664 and our camera. So here we have, let's just focus the screen. We can see that they don't match. And on the camera, I will change the recording mode in the user bits menu from internal to external. What that means is, instead of using the camera's internal real-time clock to set the date, we're actually going to use the generated user bits that we created inside the 664. Now that we've set it to external, we should be able to go back to the user bit menu, and we can now see that those two user bits match. The reason user bits are so important is if you're working on multi-day shoots, let's say you're shooting 10 days in a row, and let's say every day you roll camera precisely at 9 a.m. Well, that's going to mean you have 10 shots, 10 files for 9 a.m. And when you're syncing everything automatically in post, your post software isn't going to know which day that 9 a.m. take belongs to. So having your user bits set up properly just ensures that everything will be organized day by day, shot by shot. Just a quick tutorial to show you how to edit metadata like scene and take info, or relabel your tracks, or even just leave a note for the editor. So let's go to File Storage, Take List, and here it'll say Next. This is showing us that we can relabel the next take. So I'm just going to confirm this is Scene 1, Take 1. So you can have presets for different scene names, but Scene 1, Take 1. And you could create a note for the editor here, so I could say, maybe room tone is the first thing of the day we're going to capture. But you know what? I've already made a typo. I made a mistake. So I'm going to use this little switch as a backspace. Okay? So we're going to name this room. And again, made a mistake, so backspace, room tone. And I'm going to hit OK with this switch down here. So room tone, scene 1, take 1. I have all my tracks labeled. I can even rename my mix tracks if I wanted to. Rename my tracks X1 and 2. And here we have Boom, Sarah, Hank, Robert, Adam, Heather on my labs. Okay, so let's record for 5 seconds by hitting the little record transport up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's say we're going to move on to a new setup. So you guys would move on to your second slate, and it would be called Slate 1, Take 1. But in this case, in this menu, it's going to be called Scene 1, Take 1. So back to the take list, and I'm going to edit the next. So Slate 2, or Scene 2, Take 1. And this one, maybe it's not room tone. So I'm going to delete that note. So record again for 5 seconds. All right. So what if we made a mistake and we need to edit the last take or a previous take? We can go down to File Storage, Take List, choose the file in question, and I'm just going to edit it. So let's say that was actually setup 3. So that was Slate 3 or Scene 3. Okay, so now it's edited. Go into the menu, File Storage, Sound Report Info. Now here you can see, a bunch of specs relating to your job. So let's say it's the end of the day and it's time to write a sound report. This sound report is going to come in really useful in post to see any scene or take mismatches or errors in our naming. This is going to help us if we have any timecode problems, and we'll be able to see our track list and the track names. So first, let's go back again to that file storage menu. We're going to go into our file list this time, and we're going to use the option switch and create sound report, but it's not going to work. So first, I want you guys to just pay attention to the fact that we have to dig in to the CF card, push the menu button in, And I've created a folder called test, and that's where we're going to create our sound report in your daily folder. Because remember, you're going to have a folder for each day that you're shooting. So you want to create a sound report at the end of each day. So I've identified my daily folder here with the date, option, create sound report, done. So now it should just be a file on the memory card.